Greetings viewers, Eric the Car Guy here, also known as ETCG1 on this here channel. And on ETCG1 we talk about stuff automotive related. We do not do repair videos. If you want to see repair videos, check me out over on Eric the Car Guy. For today's topic, I thought we'd talk a little bit about what it is to be the boss and think like a boss, is I think going to be the title of this one. So for me, it's been about 5 years since I have had my own business. And I have never been happier, honestly, but I've also worked harder at my own business than any other job I've ever had. And it's put a lot of things into perspective as far as my years of being an employee and being employed. But even when I was an employee, quote unquote, I still thought like a boss. And when I say that, this is kind of what I mean. When you're collecting a paycheck, pretty much that's what you see. You've got a check that you get at the end of the week, end of the month, whatever, and you take that money and you use that to pay your rent, you buy your food, you do all that kind of stuff. That's what you do. That's your end of your income. That's what happens. You trade your time in exchange for a paycheck. And your boss or the owner of that company or whatever pays that paycheck. And you cash it and go on and do all the things that I mentioned before. But when you're the boss, or when you're the person in charge, there's a whole different sector to this. First of all, it's, and there's been a lot of response to my slow pay video, which I'll post a link to in the description. There's collecting money from people that owe you money. There is taking that money and paying your bills for the business. And then there's paying your employees. So there's a lot more involved for the boss or the person running the show than there is for an employee that is just doing a job. And this is kind of why I bring this up. There's a couple of reasons actually. Number one, if you think about what your boss has to go through in order to pay your paycheck, then you might have a little more of a vested interest in what it is you're doing. I mean, there's a tendency as an employee to say, it's not my problem, it's somebody else's problem. And I don't fault you for that because, let's face it, not all of us work for good people, but in essence, you are a contributor to a larger thing. And in doing so, you are one piece of a puzzle. So you are actually numbers on a page at the end of the day. So you are getting paid to do job X. And if you do job X well and all that kind of thing, you get your paycheck, you might get an occasional raise or something like that, and everything's fine. But if you're not doing that job well, then ultimately that employer or that boss has to deal with you. They have to look at you and they have to say, well, am I getting the return on investment that I'm making with this person? And is it possible to change them if they're not giving me the return on investment that I'm expecting? Or is it time to let them go? Now, when I worked as an employee, I always thought to myself, if I make myself as valuable as possible, if I am good value for money to my employers, then I'll never have to worry about my job. And that was my thinking, that was my philosophy. So I would do things like maybe stay a little later, maybe sweep the floors when actually it was somebody else's job, but the floors needed sweeping, so I'd sweep the floors. Or for instance, on weekends, I worked at the dealership. Sometimes people would leave lights on or fans on or something like that. And me, I'm thinking in my head, if this was my house, I wouldn't stand for that. Nobody being around and the lights are on or just electricity is just being used, wasted actually. It's just that's just money going out the door. So I would go around turning off lights, turning off fans and those kinds of things in an effort to be the best value for money. Because that's the way I thought. I didn't think, I didn't walk by those lights that were on or any of that stuff that I would see and say, that's not my problem. I'd say to myself, you know what, maybe I can contribute to my employer and in essence, maybe I'll get a little back from that. That was my hope. That doesn't always work out, but that was my hope and that was my way of thinking. My point is not to talk about my story with that. My point is to say, when you're in that employment situation, there's a much bigger picture. And if you're only thinking about your job, I think you're always going to stay in that job. Now, if you're happy there and everything, that's fine. But if you're one of those people that maybe is not necessarily happy with the job that you have, and you do look at the boss and think how great he's got it. He's got, the $500,000 motorhome or whatever that he takes down to whatever vacation spot is close to you, and you're envious of that fact, and that you put in so much time and effort so that he can afford to, or she can afford to go out and do other things that you're not able to do. Well, that's the type of thinking that I think will limit you and keep you where you're at. Now, once again, if you're happy where you're at, great. But if you're not happy where you're at, take a good look at why, and take a good look at and ask yourself, am I good value for money? Am I doing the thing that I'm being paid to do? And am I going above and beyond? Now, the questions of whether or not you're being appreciated for that, or that's even being noticed, well, that's a whole other video. I'm talking about the state of mind that you're in when you think like a boss. Now, flip that over. Like I said, 5 years ago, I started my own business of Eric the Car Guy, and here we are. And it's been a lot of hard work and effort, but I took the resources that I had, the materials at hand, and turned it into what you're seeing now, which is the finished product. And advertising on these videos helps. That's how I make my living. And managing all that encompasses so much more than just thinking about the job that I'm doing. Because just a few minutes ago, I just swept out this garage. I didn't have somebody sweep out the garage. I was here. I had to do it. And that's what I mean. You know, all those little details as an employee that you're not concerned with suddenly become a concern when you are your own boss, when you are running the show. There are things that you need to think about that you didn't necessarily think about before. I have many of you coming to me saying, Eric, I want to start my own shop. I'm ready to go. I'm fresh out of school. Let's do this. And I'm like, no, no, you're not. You're not ready to go. Because there's so much that you don't know and are not aware of, and those things could bury you. I'm not saying don't try. I'm not saying don't think that way. What I'm saying is go ahead and try, go ahead and think that way, but be prepared. And know what you're getting into as much as possible before you actually get into it, and think like a boss. Think like someone who is in charge. Think like someone who has to deal with that guy that you don't get along with, or that girl that you don't get along with at work, and you have to go to somebody else to resolve the issue. They have to deal with those kinds of things. They have to deal with those financial things that I mentioned before, particularly with people not paying their bills. So you send somebody a bill and they don't pay you, well, that can definitely affect your bottom line, and you have to take resources from elsewhere and pull them in so that you can cover your operating expenses. And then you have to plan for these things into the future. You can't just think about this crisis, you have to think about possible future crises that you might have to deal with and prepare for them as such. So that, say for instance, you find yourself in a situation where a client or somebody hasn't paid you, your income stream is interrupted for whatever reason. You're able to keep going, you're able to keep an operation because you planned for that. Think like a boss. Or, like I said, you could just use this as a way of evaluating your performance as an employee. You can say to yourself, okay, my employer has invested X amount per week, bi-weekly, monthly, however you get paid. They invest in X amount. Are they getting that return on that investment? And I'm not saying you should feel entitled for the things that you're doing necessarily, because the truth is many of us are employed at will, which means it doesn't matter. They can fire you for whatever reason at any time. A whole other video, once again. However, what I want to focus on in this video is just your mentality at work and how you go about things. And if you have aspirations of becoming something more than you are now. If that's the case, then think like a boss. Think of the big picture. Think of the business as a whole and approach it as such. Approach it as you are only one part of a larger entity. And in order for that entity to grow and be successful, all the little pieces need to work together in order for that to happen. And if that doesn't happen, well, you may have a failed business. And if you have a failed business and you're an employee of a failed business, well, now there are several times where management is not thinking like a boss, and they think it is somebody else's problems, and you get a whole host of problems from that. We can look at the US banking industry for some of that stuff, but once again, a whole other video. I don't mean to get down these rabbit holes. I'm just trying to cite examples. So when you're out there in the world, you go to your job, think like a boss. Think about how you fit in. Think about, are you up to speed? Are you good value for money? And if you're aspiring to more out of life and you're aspiring to starting your own business, one of the first things that you have to do is change your attitude. And you need to change your perception of your place in your job and what it is to run the show. because it's not what you think. I can guarantee you that it's not what you think. Until you actually get there, you won't know, because it's just the nature of things. So I hope this inspires some thoughtful, provocative discussion in the comments below. But I also have a link to a forum discussion down in the description that you can click on, and we can continue the discussion over there at ericthecarguy.com. Speaking of ericthecarguy.com, if you have automotive questions, I would ask that you head over to ericthecarguy.com, type in a couple of keywords to the search function at the top of the page that relate to your problem, and it's quite possible you will get an answer. If you don't get an answer, feel free to sign up for our forum. It's absolutely free. All you need is an email address. Just be sure to respond to your confirmation email. If you don't see it, check your spam folder. And once you do that, we're a lot of happy-go-lucky, friendly people over there at the forum that hopefully can help you resolve that issue. If you wish to connect with me socially, I can be found on Google+, Facebook, and Twitter, and I close my videos with: be safe, have fun, and stay dirty. Think like a boss.